What's up, guys? The S3TV here, and we are here for another Oldie Sarcastic Productions video. This one is History Summarized, Atlantic Exploration. And yeah, let's get into it. And yeah, this should be pretty good because I know a little bit about Atlantic exploration. I know it had a lot to do with, like, it had a lot first to do with the Vikings, then Portugal and Spain. So yeah, that's what I know about it first. But let's learn some more about it as we're getting, as we're gonna look into this deep dive of it in History Summarized. So yeah, let's get into it. And also comment videos that you want me to react to in the comment section down below. And yeah, subscribe to the channel too. Want to get 1,000 subscribers by Valentine's Day. And yeah, let's get into it and play.
The turn of the 1500s was an absolutely wild time for the cartography industry, and of course also the sailing industry, food import business, aspiring empire builders, and basically anything that stood to profit from the realization that there was about twice as much globe as previously imagined. Sure, people had known the world was round for literally millennia, but what shocked them was learning there was stuff over there. Between the fully accidental discovery of a nominally new continent and the realization that one could bypass Ottoman toll booths by taking the scenic route to India, the world suddenly became very much larger but also vastly more accessible. There is plenty to be said about the conquistadors and all the transcontinental trade routes that got going in the 1500s, but my goal today is to rewind to where the Age of Exploration started, and look at how the kingdoms of Iberia laid the groundwork for this worldwide wayfaring by bopping around in their Atlantic backyards. So, to see how the Azores, Madeira, and Canaries launched Spain and Portugal into worldwide power, let's do some history. Okay, so I know I just said Spain like literally 6 seconds ago, but that's not actually correct. In the 1400s, Iberia was home to 4 separate states: the Christian kingdoms of Portugal, Castile, and Aragon, with the Muslim Emirate of Granada at the southern tip of the peninsula. And this was all a fairly recent development because most of the medieval period had it the other way around, with powerful and prosperous Muslim states in al-andalus presiding over an ethnically diverse and multi-religious society during the Golden Age of Islam. That's a lot of fancy words to basically say it was cool, but I mean, yeah, it was very cool, and even their Christian adversaries recognized that. Despite fighting centuries of wars against the Muslim states to conquer the peninsula, they borrowed heavily from the culture and scholarship of their newly incorporated domains. Al-Andalus was part of a vast transcontinental society that shared notes on topics like astronomy, cartography, and navigation, which would become invaluable to Iberia's new Christian landlords. But while Aragon, Castile, and Portugal were rich in the culture and smart boys they inherited, they burned a lot of money on armies to get to that point, and as a result they were in the doubly unpleasant position of being isolated at the southwest edge of the Christian world and quite handily cash flow negative. So with Mediterranean trade routes bottlenecked by Venetian, Ottoman, and Mamluk middlemen, the Iberians had to get a little creative. Although Castile might have looked to be in the strongest spot, with coastlines on both seas and by far the biggest land to draw from, they were spread pretty thin and had 3 actively hostile frontiers to deal with. Aragon was arguably better situated, with mountains guarding the land and a wide open coast that reached out to their chain of islands. They still had to suffer exorbitant Venetian markups if they wanted anything from beyond Sicily, but hey, half the Mediterranean is not bad. Then there's Portugal, who on paper really didn't come out of the Reconquista so hot, but they turned this subjectively suboptimal situation to their advantage by working with what they had. In this case, the Atlantic. Several different factors worked together to draw Portugal out to sea. In typical Renaissance and medieval Muslim fashion, they saw scientific inquiry and natural exploration as a celebration of God's world. And with so many secondhand accounts of magnificent lands just beyond the Straits of Gibraltar, it was an easy sell. But this high-minded curiosity paired with a hefty Christian zeal to convert and conquer, which came pre-packaged in a history of multi-century crusading. All of these traits were embodied in one Prince Henry the Navigator, younger brother to King Edward and the architect of Portugal's naval power. His epithet is a little erroneous since he personally never sailed out of line of sight of Iberia, but his generous patronage of maritime R&D gave Portuguese sailors the tools, ships, and skills to succeed out in the ocean. Henry was able to do this in part because he was a royal, and also because he was the Grand Master of the Order of Christ, which, you may wish to note, is literally the Templars. The original group was abolished by the Pope and some fire in 1312, but in 1319 Portugal's King Dinis reconstituted them as the Order of Christ to thank the knights who helped in the Reconquista. So Henry had the additional motive of taking the crusade across the Straits of Gibraltar to campaign against Islam in Morocco and beyond. Specifically, he wanted to investigate Africa to find the mythical kingdom of Prester John, with whom he hoped to, I guess, outflank the Muslims. And look, Prester John is one of those things that's everything and nothing at once, and the mystique of a long-lost Christian kingdom beyond the Muslim world is vague enough to let anything be Prester John if you cherry-pick and squint. It's Portugal's version of the El Dorado goose chase, except if you drop the fantasy parts, then it does actually exist, and it's just called Ethiopia. My friends, I have gone off topic. Let us correct this error by jumping into the ocean. So, Portugal's first foray was local, capturing the Moroccan port of Ceuta in 1415, but soon Portugal found the island of Madeira and discovered the Azores archipelago. Rediscovered is probably a better word, because medieval maps did feature island chains approximating the Azores, so there's the non-zero chance that Scandinavian and/or Andalusian and/or Genoese sailors had spotted them first. As far as Portugal was concerned, nobody lived there. It's free real estate. Early settlement began in the 20s and 30s, but colonization ramped up substantially in the middle of the century. More than being some neat little spots of land to claim, Madeira and the Azores soon revealed their usefulness as way stations to the rest of the Atlantic and for growing cash crops once they had a large enough labor force. Portugal wasted absolutely zero time in writing the gut-punchingly grotesque playbook of colonization, importing slaves from the west coast of Africa to irrigate, farm, harvest, and refine sugarcane. It took a couple decades for Portugal to realize what exactly the islands could be used for, but once they did, oh boy. The crucial piece of this profit puzzle was definitely...
They were on like Donkey Kong.
The slaves, because it's only after Portugal sailed down the African coast and bought slaves that they could suddenly staff all these colonies. Portugal's interest in exploring Africa started from their rivalry with Morocco and expanded into a desire to visit the lands of legendarily rich kings like Mansa Musa. And as they might have hoped...
And Mansa Musa still, I believe, the richest man that has ever lived, which is insane.
Portugal found itself very much the junior trading partner of the Mali Empire. At first, Portugal actually had a hard time getting Malian merchants to buy any of their junk, but even what little they could take back was worth a lot more in Europe, and soon Portuguese traders were able to do more substantive business and, of course, export more slaves. On the African side of things, Portugal pushed ever further southwards, taking Cape Verde in 1458 and reaching all the way down to Namibia by 1486. As they built a chain of coastal and island forts, they cut what on its own was an impossibly long continental journey down into a series of small, easy hops. Just 2 years later, in 1488, sailors rounded what they called the Cape of Storms and made it to East Africa, which opened up into the Indian Ocean. The king was so delighted that he renamed it to the Cape of Good Hope to make the prospect of more countless riches for crown and country look less like certain doom to the sailors who would actually be going there. Back on the Atlantic side of things, the island colonies were farming so aggressively they nearly destroyed their ecosystems, knocking the colonists back down to subsistence farming because the soil was nutritionally broke. Luckily, they were still invaluable way stations to the African coast and, after 1500, to Brazil. See, the sailors had figured out that it was easier to pass the Cape of Storms if they sailed out west to catch the South Atlantic wind current, which would comfortably carry them east across the Cape. But as it happens, one ship's journey slightly too far west revealed a shiny new landmass that would be perfect for more exploitative agriculture. Keen to replicate past successes on the Azores and Madeira without dallying on pesky roadblocks like the environment and slavery, Brazil earned Portugal quite a pretty penny, and the Atlantic Islands were both the springboard and the prototype that made it possible. So with Portugal's oceanic avenues wide open and money pouring in, let's rewind slightly to see how Castile was handling their Atlantic frontier in the 1400s. As it happens, slowly. Like we said at the start, Castile had enough problems to handle just in Iberia, so aquatic exploration got bumped down the to-do list. Castile did send an expedition to the Canary Islands off the coast of Morocco in 1402, but they delegated the job to some French nobles. The colonized islands were technically under the crown of Castile, but in reality they were private operations. Portugal tried to muscle in on a few occasions without making any real progress, but really no one could lay a strong hand on all the islands because the Canaries, unlike the Azores and Madeira, were inhabited.
Oh, Latin for dolls, okay. And the islands had plenty. And the islands had plenty since antiquity. Okay, so that makes sense.
Being rather close to the continent, these islands had been lived on for thousands of years, with records tracing back to Rome, Numidia, Greece, and Carthage. Even in the medieval period, explorers from North Africa, Iberia, and Italy had visited these islands and traded with their indigenous Guanche people. Castile was just the first state to actually try and take it. This century-long process rapidly accelerated after 1479 when King Ferdinand of Aragon and Queen Isabella of Castile combined their domains into the new Kingdom of Spain. So suddenly, the crown had more resources on hand and fewer problems to throw them at. This was good news for their conquest of the Canaries, and also bad news for the native Guanches. Come on, let's not be surprised that Spain is a co-founder of the Gross Colonial Conduct Club. So the crown spent the next 2 decades conquering the Canaries, and in 1492 they finally subdued their longtime rivals in Granada to complete their Reconquista. With Iberia done, they set about catching up to Portugal's maritime lead, and later that year they sponsored the accidentally world-changing voyage of the notorious Crisco Colombo, who took a stopover in the Canaries on his way to find the Indies. Nothing else, because if it wasn't the Indies, then that would mean his math was like way off.
Crazy, right? Like, it's not like his math, it's not like he wasn't, he was a great, it's not like he wasn't a great, explorer, He was amazing. He was everything that every explorer aspires to be.
And that would make him a doofus, which he super definitely wasn't. So, it must have just been the Indies, guys. I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, I know you know the rest of that escapade, so let's wrap our story here. Despite the unassuming size of the Canaries, Azores, and Madeira, they played an outsized role in launching Spain and Portugal from humble beginnings into imperial stardom. They started the 1400s poor and isolated, but wound up set to rule the damn world. In 1493, a papal treaty officially split the globe into the Spain half and the Portugal half. Of course, as swiftly as they yoinked the world, they'd eventually lose it too. More nations joined the contest in the 16 and 1700s, and bigger ships could just bypass the islands. So even before the Spanish and Portuguese empires declined, the islands languished as backwaters. That is, until certain 20th century events that I am woefully unqualified to explain. Still, what I find most remarkable about this first chapter in long-distance seafaring is how swiftly Spain and Portugal wrote the colonial playbook that other European empires would follow, using coastal forts and island bases to break up long trips, cultivating cash crops with imported slave labor, and enslaving or destroying native population. Gangs all here in the 1400s. Quick, no one tells Spain what platinum looks like. It'll be hilarious. Thank you so much for watching. Leave it to me to tackle a period in history that's strongly associated with one very specific person and then fully refuse to even mention him by name. Enough people...
Which is amazing. You shouldn't have to mention him by name because he was a very stupid person. He didn't do anything that was amazing. He was supposed to find spices and he found something completely different, which wasn't even that plentiful. So, very, very nice, very nice. But, yeah, so talk to you guys in the next video. And, yeah. Subscribe to the channel. I want to get 1,000 subscribers by Valentine's Day. And also comment videos that you want me to react to in the comment section down below. And, yeah, talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.